Thanks for joining me on episode 635 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
Hey guys, this is Matt Ham from Uprint. I want to encourage you to find your own journey to living your life's calling. And one way to be inspired to do that is to listen to the Inspired Stewardship Podcast with my friend Scott Mader.
If I find a new shiny thing that I really want, then I'll wait 24 hours before making the purchase. Just that simple act of waiting can actually cause you to sometimes change your mind. Because you look up and you recognize, this isn't really going to get me where I want to go right now.
Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world.
In today's episode about impacting the world through stewarding your treasures, I talk with you about recognizing your invisible money habits. Why not knowing these can make or break your success with money, and how reforming these habits can happen so you can actually win. As we talk about stewarding your treasures, wouldn't it be great if you could support this podcast and do it without costing yourself an extra dime? Turns out you can. All you have to do is use inspiredstewardship.com/Amazon when you're ready to make a purchase via Amazon, and a small commission will come back to support the show. If you enjoy the show when you're ready to buy from Amazon, just use inspiredstewardship.com/Amazon. One of the things that I've found working with people on their budgets and their money, time after time after time, is that a lot of times we have these invisible scripts or invisible habits or mindsets or beliefs, whatever you want to phrase it, that we have deeply ingrained in ourselves that we repeat over and over and over again. And they often break down any possibility we have of real success with our money. One of the frustrations that I've found that people have with their money is they keep trying new things, but the truth is they keep returning to the old familiar habits and behaviors that have not gotten them where they want to go in the first place. We all have these invisible scripts, these invisible habits that just run in our day. We all do, no matter what. Earlier this week in the time episode, I talked a little bit about how, you could have a day off but you have an appointment across town and you get in the car at the same time that normally you leave for work. And suddenly you drive and you look up and you find yourself in the work parking lot, even though you were supposed to drive maybe to the airport or somewhere else, because the script fires off because of the time and getting in the car that your normal pattern of behavior is to just drive to work. And without even thinking about it, you just do that same process and you end up at work without thinking about it. And the same things happen to us with our money too. We oftentimes begin to recognize and do things with our money that don't set us up for long-term success. We repeat the same sorts of behavior day in and day out without really thinking about the long-term ramifications and impact of those. And the truth is, when you begin to recognize this sort of pattern of behavior, that's the first steps towards making a real change, is actually recognizing those invisible money habits. And here's the thing, oftentimes you can't really recognize your own beliefs and your own habits because you're so deeply ingrained in them that it's hard to step outside of yourself and observe them. That's one of the reasons that working with someone else can help you. But I wanted to give you some tricks that you can listen for in your own behavior and your own mindset. So these are things that you might say out loud to a friend or a family member, or they're things that you might just think in your own inner mind that are they're little heads up that you may have some of these invisible habits being triggered in your money. and you need to dig a little deeper and see what's really going on. So here's some examples of those sorts of phrases. If you find yourself saying a lot, well, I had to, when it comes to a money decision, I had to buy a new car. I had to get that from the store. I had to. Recognize that the truth is you didn't have to do most of those things. You chose to. A really close relative of this phrase is, well, I needed it. I need to do that. I need this. There are things that we need to be able to survive. But the truth is a lot of the stuff that we do with our money isn't a need. It's a want. And don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean you shouldn't have nice things. That doesn't mean you shouldn't spend money on things that are entertaining and fun and enjoyable. But it does mean that technically is a want, not a need. And by labeling it a need, you're allowing yourself to repeat a pattern of behavior that may not get you where you want to go long term. Another one of those things that you can hear people say, I'll do it next month. I'll get started on that diet next month. I'll get started working out next month. I'll get started taking control of my money next month. Doesn't matter what area of behavior it is, that constant attitude of I'll do it next holds us back. And it means that there's invisible scripts running in your head. I'll save money with what's left over. If I just make enough money, it won't matter what I do with my money. I'll be able to out-earn any misbehavior that I have. If I just track what I spend, then I'll notice the patterns and I'll begin to fix my behavior. I don't have to do a budget. I don't have to do any planning. I don't have to think about it. I can just look at what happened after the fact. See, all of this is about this idea that it's about the money somehow, not the behavior, not the beliefs, not the habits, not the systems, not the processes. And the truth is, the money is the result that you get based on the habits and the mindsets and the beliefs and the processes and the systems that you execute. If you don't recognize that there are things that you're doing that are holding you back, then you can't really have long-term success. Because even if you get a short-term success, even if someone walked up to you tomorrow and handed you $1 million, trust me, you can blow $1 million really quickly. I've seen it happen. I've had people come to me after they got an inheritance and they blew through it. And they suddenly recognized that they really needed some help gaining control, not of their money, but of their behavior around their money. That turned out to be the thing that really was the problem. And what happens is you have to begin to reform your habits. As you notice these trigger phrases, as these things that you're saying to yourself, notice the behavior that triggered that thought. Notice the behavior that triggered you saying that to your friend. And when you see that behavior, notice what came before that behavior. What triggered the underlying spending? What triggered the misbehavior, if you want to label it that? It's really not misbehavior, but the behavior that's really not getting you where you want to go. Look before the behavior. What preceded it? What emotion? What location? What feeling? What event? And what you'll discover is there's usually triggers that set off a pattern of behavior. As you begin to dig in and find those triggers, that's what allows us to shift our behavior. We talked about the same thing with time. And the key thing to realize is time and money are very similar in some ways. They're both finite resources. And so as you can dig in and reform these habits, create a new, if this happens, then I'll do that. If I find a new shiny thing that I really want, then I'll wait 24 hours before making the purchase. Just that simple act of waiting can actually cause you to sometimes change your mind. Because you look up and you recognize, this isn't really going to get me where I want to go right now. So as you begin to notice those things, that allows you to take the step of reforming the habits. And as you do that over time, that's what really allows you to win. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you like this episode on the stewardship of treasures, you can sign up for our treasures tips by going to inspiredstewardship.com/treasures or text in the U.S. 44222 treasures tips. And we'll send you 5 weeks of our best tips on stewarding your treasures. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.